Welcome to the Gay Buddhist Forum, where teachers from all schools of Buddhism offer their perspectives on the Dharma and its application in modern times, especially for LGBTQI audiences. These talks are offered freely to the world and made possible by appreciative listeners. If you would like to support our efforts to share the Dharma with underserved audiences, please visit gaybuddhist.org. There you can donate, find a list of upcoming speakers, or enjoy many hundreds of these recorded talks dating back to 1996.
It's our tradition here at GBF to go around and introduce ourselves. I'd like to ask that people take a moment after saying their names to let the group absorb it before we just rush to the next person. My name is Joe Good.
My name is Marty.
My name is Marvin.
My name is Bill.
My name is Nathan.
My name is Bruce.
My name is Mark.
My name is Peter. My name is Chris.
My name is Daniel.
My name is George.
My name is Pete.
My name is Richard.
My name is Marty.
My name is Michael. My name is Alan.
My name is Jay.
My name is Adam.
My name is Cass.
I'm George.
I'm Eric.
My name is Harley. My name is Luis.
My name is Alex.
My name is Tony.
I'm Bruce.
I'm Ron.
That's great.
Daniel.
David.
I'm Bob.
I'm Patrick.
I'm Carter.
I'm Sue.
Is that everybody? Did we miss anybody? Are there any people here for the first time to GBF? I hope those of us who consider ourselves old timers will welcome them during the social moment afterwards. Our speaker today is Susan Moon. Welcome.
Thank you.
Susan is a writer and teacher. For many years was the editor of Turning Wheel, the journal of socially engaged Buddhism. She's the author of The Life and Letters of Tofu Roshi, a humor book about an imaginary Zen master, and editor of Not Turning Away, the Practice of Engaged Buddhism. Her short stories and essays have been published widely. Her new book, This Is Getting Old, Zen Thoughts on Aging with Dignity and Humor, which I think many of us will relate to, is now published, and she's got some copies out there that we can purchase after. She's been a Zen student since 1976, practicing in the lineage of Suzuki Roshi at Berkeley Zen Center, Tassajara Zen Mountain Monastery, Green Gulch Farm, and now with Zoketsu Norman Fischer's Everyday Zen Sangha. She received entrustment as a lay teacher in 2005. She's the mother of 2 grown sons and the grandmother of Paloma. Welcome.
Thank you. That's a lot of stuff about me to be reminded of. But the last thing might be the most important, the grandmother of Paloma. So it's great to be back here. I've been here every year with you all, not necessarily the same individual faces, but the same Sangha for quite a few years now. And I really appreciate being part in some way of this gay men Sangha. It's great for me to be able to come here and be with you. And today I do want to talk about getting old. And I'm going to talk about my book, and I'm going to be reading some passages from the book. So it will be a sort of book talk, Dharma talk combined. Getting old is a subject that I'm learning more about with every passing day. And all of us are doing it, even if you're not old now, you're getting old. And even if you aren't old now, you probably know somebody who's kind of old. So it's really a subject that's of interest to all of us in some way. And I'm aware of the fact that I'm kind of a baby at getting old still. I'm really healthy and I don't have too many losses that limit what I can do in my life. My body and mind work a little differently than they have in the past. But so I'm aware of the fact that I'm getting old, but I'm also very, very aware of how my elders, who are really suffering a lot of losses, are people that I respect and admire, and I don't mean to be claiming to know all about how to do it when it gets really hard. But I think it's a good time to start training. And when I turned 60 and I really noticed that, I hadn't been planning to get old at all. I was planning to have a lot of more birthdays, but I hadn't been planning to get old in the process. And I noticed that that was actually happening to me, and I thought maybe I should take a look at it and see what it was all about. And also my Zen practice encourages me to look at what's difficult and not turn away from what's difficult. And sometimes when you do that, it turns out not to be as hard as you thought, or what you're afraid of isn't always what you think it's going to be when you really look at it. So I approached aging with curiosity, and I looked at the different parts of it that were worrying me, and my book has 3 sections in it, and the first section has pieces about changes that I've observed in my body and mind, kind of physiological changes, memory loss, arthritis in my knees, falling down the front steps of my house, my balance not so good, a piece about my mother's death, different things that actually do happen to the body and the mind. And then there's something about eyesight, and some difficulties I have with eyesight is in there. But then the second section has essays about the changes that happen in our lives in social relationships, and how we're maybe seen differently or connect differently to people. In my case, I noticed becoming kind of invisible as I become an older woman. I also became a grandmother. That's a social change, obviously. And then about friendships, and how friendships change and relationships change, and how the old friendships become extremely precious as I get older, I've noticed. So it's the middle section, and then the last section has pieces about more spiritual changes and how I see aging as an opportunity to really journey inward more when you're no longer able to make as many adventurous journeys in the external world. It's a good time to journey inward and explore a spiritual practice or whatever. And also to kind of take on some eldership in some way, whatever that might mean. So I thought I would read you a couple of pieces, or excerpts from a couple of pieces. I'll just start with one of the most whined about experiences of getting older is losing your memory, and people experience that before they're very old too. But it can happen more and more the older you get, of just not remembering details, proper names. And of course, there are things you can do to keep your neurons firing well and to keep your mind active. But it does seem to be kind of a physiological fact that the older brain takes longer to access the information that's stored in it. So I'm going to read you from a piece called "Where Did I Put My Begging Bowl?" The other day, as I was filling out a form, I couldn't remember my social security number. I made a running start at it several times, but I couldn't get past 013. I had to look it up on last year's income tax form. To reassure myself, I recited the books of the Old Testament in order, without a pause. My great aunt had paid me $2 to learn them when I was 10, and they've stayed in my head for over 50 years. She said it would come in handy to know them by heart, and so it did, though not in the way she had expected. Of course, memory loss is a normal part of aging. I bet Buddha sometimes forgot where he put his bowl down in his later years. But normal or not, it's inconvenient, even disabling. More than once, I've had to enlist a friend to walk the streets with me, looking for where I parked my car. My mind, like my bladder, is shrinking with age so that it doesn't hold as much at once. I now put people in my Rolodex by their first name if I think I'm going to forget their last. Forgetfulness eats away at people's names, starting at the end, so that sometimes I find myself clinging to the first letter of the first name like a person at sea hanging onto a splintered piece of the mast. My mother went through a period of time when she said she couldn't remember ordinary words, and she began writing them down after she did remember them in a little notebook that she carried around with her. Catalog, vascular, pollen. She thought she might be able to look them up when she needed them. Now it happens to me too. I know there's a good word for the thing I want to say, and I can't get hold of it. If somebody else says it, I know what it means, but I can't seem to get it on the hook and reel it in, to put it in my, what do you call those wicker baskets that fishermen use? Then I talk about going to see a psychologist when I got really panicked that I was having dementia or something. And I went to see a psychologist about my cognitive functioning, and he gave me some tests and said everything was fine. He said I just had to repeat words forwards and backwards and colors and do little tricks with my mind. And he said, I did very well for your age. So this was reassuring, though for your age has a sad ring to it, like you look good for a woman your age. The visit helped me to accept that some memory loss is normal. It's what's happening. I have a different brain now, but as long as I'm grasping for the mind that I had 20 years ago, I suffer. Then, too, there's the remembering. I may not remember the last names of lots of people I know, but I remember seeing my father standing in the doorway of our apartment in Chicago, looking like a stranger in his brown army uniform and hat, silhouetted against the light from outside. I must have been about 2.5, and he was going off to the war in the Pacific. The older you are, the more of your life is in the past, and the more historical your memories become. It's part of the job description of an older person to tell stories about times that are gone, about what it's like to have your father disappear into a war, for example, or about stepping off the Greyhound bus in Biloxi, Mississippi 45 years ago to work on voter registration and being greeted by the sheriff saying, "Now don't you be causing any trouble in our town, young lady." History is not what really happened. There's no such thing. It's what people remember and tell each other. But it is good if you don't go on too long. Sometimes I tell a story more than once, forgetting that I've told it before, especially when I'm talking to my children. I try to remember to say, stop me if I've already told you this, because I know from listening to my own mother how annoying it is to sit through a story you've heard before, pretending to be surprised at the punchline. Well, actually, it's only annoying if you remember the story. And this is one reason why old folks should hang out together. When I tell my old friend Bill a story for the second time, it doesn't matter because he's completely forgotten the story. This is called beginner's mind. Memory is plastic. What I remember isn't necessarily what happened, and how I remember it changes depending on my changing focus of attention. The body memories, like how you button a button, seem to be the last to go. A longtime Dharma sister has advanced Alzheimer's and is no longer able to come to the Zen Center to practice. But she did come for a long time after she'd forgotten how to manage her life. Someone from the Sangha would pick her up at home and bring her to morning zazen. She didn't know where she was going or why or who was helping her. She had to be guided from the car to the Zen Center, and she had to be helped into her priest's robes. But once she was inside the Zendo, the forms of her 35 years of practice were held in her body. I was moved to see how, during service, she was right on track, manifesting dignity and devotion. She recited the Heart Sutra from memory along with everyone else. She bowed when it was time to bow, and she exited the zendo when her turn came, greeting the abbot with a gasho on her way out. Outside the zendo, she was lost again. Sometimes, driving along one of my familiar routes, I suddenly can't remember where I'm going. Then I'm in a dark place, even in broad daylight. I keep driving, slowly, hoping I'll remember where I'm going before I get there. So far, I always have. Zen Master Dogen, my favorite Zen master, famously wrote, "To study the Buddha way is to study the self. To study the self is to forget the self. To forget the self is to be enlightened by the 10,000 things." What does he mean by forgetting the self? Could forgetting my social security number or where I parked my car be steps in the right direction? If I lose my memory, will I stop being me? Or is there a me beneath the memory? Is there a look in my eye that will stay no matter what I forget? I believe that Dogen is talking about forgetting self-concern. And as I grow older, I notice what an excellent time it is to practice this kind of forgetting. It's all about letting go. I can forget about accomplishing all my ambitions. It's too late for that. Sometimes, for a moment, I taste the relief of letting this self fold gently into the next self, moment by moment, like eggs into batter. It's time to forget some things and remember others. As a matter of fact, the planet needs all of us human beings to remember our history and to remember our own accountability in it. History is a process that we keep on making out of the stories we tell each other about the past. Now, if you forget the books of the Old Testament, you can look them up on the internet. But there are still some things that the internet can't remember for you, like where you parked the car. And the stories of your life, they aren't on the internet either. How it was, for example, to be sitting in bed nursing your newborn baby when you learned on the TV news of Martin Luther King Jr.'s assassination. Oh, by the way, it's Creole, that wicker basket for fish. So that's, some of you probably share some of those experiences, and that's part of my intention in writing this book, is really to be part of a conversation that is going on in a larger sense, and that we are all able to keep talking to each other about what it is. What are we experiencing? And it becomes less frightening when we know that other people are facing some of the same things that we're going through, and that we can really share this experience and support each other. Another aspect of aging that many of us face is aging parents, and dealing with aging parents, helping aging parents, worrying about aging parents. And another aspect of aging that we also face, either for our parents or for ourselves or both, are concerns about where will we live, or what's a good place to live when you're really old and really frail, and what kind of housing arrangements are supportive and helpful and manageable, financially too, of course. But I know for myself, this is something in the back of my mind. You know, I have a nice big house now that I share with other people that I've lived in for years, but it's not going to be where I'm going to live when I'm really old, because I'm not going to be able to manage this household when I'm a very frail old person. And so I don't know what the next step is, and this is something I think about. So I want to read you an essay that's about my mother and where she lived before she died. She died a few years ago. And also to say there's a lot in the book about my mother, because she was the old person I knew best, and I watched her get old and frail, and I learned a lot about getting old from her, and that was important to me. And she was a wonderful person, and she had her foibles, but she really was a good example for me of trying to be conscious about aging. But we can learn from people who aren't managing it so well. We can also learn, what are the mistakes? How can we help older people? How can we avoid some of these difficulties ourselves? So I also encourage all of you and everyone to really be alert to what's going on with the older people in your own lives and see how it is for them. This is called Getting Good at Staying Still. I was having Cheerios and milk with my mother at the little table beside the window in her retirement building in Chicago. Her 6th floor apartment overlooked Lake Michigan, and it was one of my mother's greatest pleasures in life to sit in her favorite chair and watch the passing of ore boats and clouds. This was the first morning of my visit, and my mother turned her attention from her lake to her daughter, saying, "Your hair is so wild. Can't you do something to get it out of your face?" Now, I know this is a mother-daughter thing, but I think probably it might be a mother-son thing, too. "Mom," I said, "I'm 63 years old. I'm too old for you to be telling me how to wear my hair." But apparently I wasn't too old to mind. "I just want you to know how nice it looks when you brush it back." "I know how you like it, Mom." "No, you don't. That's why I'm telling you." I thought, you've been talking to me about my hair for 60 years. Do you think I don't know what pleases you? But I didn't say it out loud. And parenthetically, I didn't cut my hair short until after my mother died, and I'm so sorry I didn't give her the satisfaction. She would finally be satisfied with my haircut. I didn't do it in time. Maybe she knows. My mother was a generous woman, and she loved her children and grandchildren with unconditional love, almost. As the Zen teacher Suzuki Roshi said to his students as he was trying to explain Buddha nature, "You're all perfect exactly as you are, and you could use a little improvement." So then I talk about how I rented a car and did errands for her and went shopping for her and cleaned out her refrigerator and took her to the doctor, and I talk about all the different things the needs that come up for older people and how they get mad, and it's difficult to figure out how to do all these different things, especially going to the doctor. That's really a big one for old people. Who's going to take them to the doctor? And then another thing I did for her, which was very satisfying for me, was that I helped her with her computer, and the reason it was satisfying was because she was the only person in the world who thought I was a computer expert. So, on the last evening of my visit, my mother had a party before dinner for a group of friends she called the Mothers of Daughters. All of these women had faraway daughters who visited them there, like me from Berkeley, California. Before the party, I brushed my hair and clipped it back as neatly as I could. 6 women traveled by elevator to my mother's apartment for wine and those little goldfish-shaped crackers. I didn't have to take their coats off when they arrived, because they had all come from inside the building, but I took 2 walkers and put them aside. My mother was happy to see them. She always said she liked to show her children off to her friends. They settled in a semicircle facing the big window. The day's light was fading to gray over the lake. The only woman I hadn't met before said, "You look just like your mother." Even in old age, my mother was an attractive woman, but does any daughter want to be told she looks just like her mother? It wasn't so much that I minded if there was a resemblance, but I did want to look younger than my mother. In fact, whenever I had occasion to ride in the elevator of her building without her, I confess I had a horror of being mistaken for one of the residents. I was almost 65, officially old enough to live there. I was moved by this group of women, all of them lively and warm-hearted, all of them dealing with the ruinations of old age. Betty, the oldest of the group, was in her 90s. The others were all in their 80s. Betty was robust and always laughing. A few years before, she and my mother had ridden the Trans-Siberian Railroad together, but after that, she had begun to suffer from dizzy spells and had to give up traveling. One of the guests couldn't hear a thing, and another, whether she was sitting or standing, was bent into the letter C. All of these women were widows, including my mother. I couldn't know how hard it was to become a widow after sharing your life with another person for 50 years. When you look at old women from the outside, not identifying with them, or old men probably, you don't think how lonely they might be or how much patience it takes to get the walker in and out of the elevator. You forget that they didn't used to be like that they used to go canoeing in the Minnesota woods or waltz until the wee hours, that they knew another kind of life outside this building. You think they came into the world wrinkled and deaf. So this is a kind of a part of our Buddhist practice too, can help us to not separate ourselves from the other and realize that, the old people, if we don't yet think we're there, are not different from us. And there's such a barrier that comes down in our minds that's kind of socially conditioned to see really elderly people, if we're not there yet, as other than ourselves, which of course they aren't. I passed the crackers like a good daughter. I offered wine, red or white, in my mother's pretty blue Mexican glasses. Betty said to me, "I hear you were just on a long Zen meditation retreat. Did it make you calm?" As a Buddhist convert, I was slightly exotic there. That afternoon, my mother had introduced me to two of her fellow residents in the elevator where a lot of her social interactions took place. "This is my Buddhist daughter from California," she had said proudly. They wanted to know all about Buddhism and whether or not I believed in reincarnation, but I didn't really have time to explain between the 6th floor and the 1st. Now I responded to Betty's question. "You're not supposed to try to accomplish anything at all, not even calmness," I said. "The idea is to let go of gaining mind, let go of your attachments." "Well, I can see that I don't need Zen meditation," said Betty. "Getting old forces you to let go of one damn thing after another." The others laughed in agreement. This is an important teaching of age. "I like Zen," my mother said, "because it says you should be in the present. That's important in old age. I'm losing interest in my past. It was so long ago. And it's pointless to think about the future. What future? But the present. There's plenty going on right now, I tell myself." I offered more wine, but there was only one taker, and I wondered if they had always practiced such moderation. The conversation moved on to the new cook in the kitchen downstairs and a dangerously creamy mushroom sauce he had used on the chicken. As the women talked and laughed, as they passed around the bowl of crackers with shaky hands, I studied them. I saw how they paid attention to each other. They were accomplished people, scholars, artists, social workers, poets, raisers of families. Now, in old age, they were accomplishing friendship, accomplishing community. It was 5:30 p.m., time in that establishment to go down to dinner. After I fetched the two walkers from the corner of the room, the 7 mothers of daughters and the one daughter, me, started down the long hall to the elevator. My mother rode in her wheelchair, making it go by walking her feet along the floor in front of her like a toddler on a riding toy. This was how she liked to do it when she was on her home turf. She said she got her best exercise in her wheelchair. People assumed she was in a wheelchair because her legs didn't work, but it was her back that hurt if she walked more than about 50 paces. But sometimes, on a good back day, she walked to the elevator with a cane. Her cane had a handle that flipped down sideways and became a tiny seat, allowing her to stop and rest. She ordered those canes from England. If you were looking at her from the front and she was sitting on her cane, it was startling because you couldn't see the cane and she appeared to be doing a strenuous yoga posture. Her knees partly bent, pretending to sit in a chair that wasn't there. But today was a wheelchair day. Our ragtag band moved down the corridor and I had to make a conscious effort to go slow. Betty, walking beside me, said, "You have such beautiful hair, Susan." My mother looked up at me from her wheelchair and we grinned at each other. So I think it's just really important to remember that we're not doing this alone. We're really getting old together. And my mother had a good opportunity. She really liked the retirement building that she lived in, and there was a wonderful sense of community there among the people who lived there, which isn't so easy to come by necessarily, but community is certainly an important thing for us as we get older, and we need to find ways to have communities to be a part of. And you have a community here, certainly, and there other kinds of community too that we can find for ourselves. So I think I want to save time for some discussion, but I think I'll read a couple more short pieces. One of the things that I've noticed that's different for me is the passage of time, and we talk about how time seems to go faster and faster and faster the older we get, and that's certainly true. But there's an opposite effect in a way, which is that I think there really is some way that it becomes more possible to slow down and be present in a kind of deep time. And I find that that happens to me more. And kind of as my mother was saying, well, there's no past. I'm not interested in the past, and the future is shrunk to nothing, so I'm present now. And that is something that I appreciate about getting older, is a kind of spaciousness that I can bring into my life. And I'm really learning it because I have a very long lifetime habit of trying to do too many things in too short a space of time. And that's not a way to be present in life and enjoy the life that I have and be grateful for the life I have. So I'm working on it, and aging is helping me to work on it because everything takes me a little bit longer to do now. And I can't multitask the way I used to be able to, and I really seem to be only able to concentrate on one thing at a time. And I can't carry too many objects around in my hand from one room to the other because then I lose one of them. And I go to a yoga class, and getting up from the floor or down onto the floor seems to take forever. Just getting out of the pose and into the next pose is a slow process. So that's good in a way. I can try to appreciate that, and some of these things that happen to us as we age, to take them as gifts, to bring forward a different consciousness and a different awareness is a good thing. And if you can't play tennis anymore, then try shuffleboard. Or if you can't walk or can't stand up, then maybe it's time to really learn bridge. Or that there are just ways to try to really adapt to the situation you're in and take advantage of it. So we all have that opportunity. This is a piece called This Vast Life. Every morning I vow to be grateful for the precious gift of human birth. It's a big gift, and it includes a lot of stuff I never particularly wanted for my birthday. Some of the things in the package I wish I could exchange for a different size or color, but I want to find out what it means to be a human being. My curiosity remains intense even as I get older. So I say thanks for the whole thing. It's all of a piece. When my granddaughter was just over 2, I visited her and her parents in Texas. She doesn't have a lot of ideas yet about how things are supposed to be or what's supposed to happen next. She's glad to be alive. I was babysitting for her one afternoon, and part of my job was to get her up from her nap. I was reading in the next room, and I knew when she woke up because I heard her chatting away to her bear. I lifted her and her bear out of her crib, and we went downstairs. While I fixed her a snack of crackers and cheese, she danced around a purple ball that was lying in the middle of the living room, singing an old nursery rhyme that she had learned in her preschool. Ring around the rosies, pocket full of posies, ashes, ashes, we all fall down. And she sat down on the floor, kerplunk, laughing. She was fully present, fully joyful. Actually, the song she was singing is a very old chant about the plague, and the last line about the ashes refers to our mortality, but she wasn't worrying about that. In his essay, The Genjo Koan, Master Dogen wrote, "A fish swims in the ocean, and no matter how far it swims, there is no end to the water. A bird flies in the sky, and no matter how far it flies, there is no end to the air. When I get unhappy about something in my life, I think, wait, no, this isn't the right life. It isn't what I want. I need to find the edge of this life and leap over the fence into a different life. But that's not how it works. My life is vast. I can't find the edge of it, just like a fish in the ocean or a bird in the sky. There's no getting out of this life, this ocean, this sky, except by dying. If I try to change oceans, I'll never find my way or my place. There's no place else to be but here in the big mystery of it. It happened that only a few days after visiting my granddaughter, I visited an old friend in his 80s who lives in an assisted living facility. He's a Catholic priest and monk who has dedicated his life to solitude and spiritual study. He's well read in multiple spiritual traditions, including Zen, and he is an important mentor to me. He's not well physically. He's weak, on oxygen, and confined to a wheelchair, but his mind is fine. He told me, "If I've died before, I don't remember it, but I recognize what's happening. That's where I'm going." Years ago, he had a coffin built for himself by a carpenter he knows. It stands upright in his little apartment like a roommate, a reminder keeping him company. He sits at his table and looks out the window at a pear tree and watches its leaves turn and fall and bud again. He watches the seasons, the whole universe, in that pear tree. He reads, he prays, he receives an occasional visitor. Like my granddaughter, he is completely present in his life. Like Dogen's fish, he is swimming around in his ocean, and there is no end to the water, even in this tiny apartment. Moments after I entered his room, he was talking to me about Isaac of Nineveh, the 8th century Syrian hermit whose writings he had been reading when I came in. Like my granddaughter, he too is singing his version of Ring Around the Rosies, dancing until he falls down and turns to ashes. In between that toddler and that old man is a span of over 80 years, and most of us, in those intervening decades, tangle ourselves up in knots over the things we don't have that we want and the things we have that we don't want. We run around trying to fix things in our personal lives and in the life of the planet. And it's a good thing we do, too, because it's actually our responsibility to fix things. We need to fix the plumbing, for example. The toddler and the old monk aren't fixing the plumbing. They need us to take care of them, but we need them, too, to remind us that everything is already taken care of. I like to think about how we are completely held by the atmosphere in a literal way. The air that surrounds each of our bodies, that flows in and out of our lungs, is not nothing. It's thick with molecules, and it fills up all the gaps and cracks between us and the other bodies and objects around us. The furniture, the walls of the room, the trees outside, the buildings. There's no empty space. The air is fluid, making room for us, so that each of us inhabits a nook that is exactly our size and shape. The air kindly moves with us when we move. It's like those soft rocks you can find on the beaches of Northern California that have tiny mollusks living inside them in the holes they made for themselves. We're all connected, molecule to molecule. I'm held by everything that's not me. The last meditation retreat I attended was beside the ocean, and while I was sitting, I listened to the surf. The surf is the sound of the ocean breathing. It's never still. Sometimes the sea is so loud and crashing that I crave a little silence, and so I listen for the silence between the waves. But just as one wave recedes from the shore, flowing back down the sand into the ocean, getting quieter and quieter, just before it gets silent, the next wave always breaks. The ocean never stops breathing because it's alive. As I sit on my seat in the zendo, following my breathing, I follow the breathing of the ocean too, and I begin to breathe in rhythm with the ocean. The sound of the ocean is the sound of time passing, the sound of one moment giving way to the next. Each wave, each moment, is a gate that I pass through into the next moment. And even if I'm not sitting by the ocean, one wave of my life is still followed immediately by the next, with no completely quiet place in between. I love the vow, Dharma gates are boundless. I vow to enter them. I keep giving myself away to the next moment, and the next moment receives me. I just have to step through. So I think maybe I'll stop there with my thoughts and invite you all to make comments, questions, or whatever, because I really want to know how it is for you. You know, what helps you as you get older what are you learning? What are the challenges? What are the pleasures? Yes.
Excuse me, my name's Greg. Thank you. I was thinking about a lot of things. In my own life, like a lot of people in our community, I was told I was going to die in the 90s. And I didn't, obviously. Today I spend about half of my time at UCSF in the oncology unit where my partner may be dying or may be surviving. And I spend a day a week in a hospice sitting with dying people. And of all of these experiences that I've had, today as I approach 50, I'm wondering how I can, in the same way I celebrate the fact that I could run 800 meters or have gymnastic sex or memorize something, how can I celebrate the fact that this is what bodies do?
Mm-hmm.
They get sick.
Mm-hmm.
How can I celebrate this other end of my life?
Mm-hmm.
This way my life is, my body is slowing down and not doing what I'd like it to do. Instead of spending so much time getting angry at it and bitching about it and sitting down with my friends and the other question, the other thought I've been toying with a lot. So in the 90s I kind of fled to this monastery because as a good perfectionist I wanted to die right. I wanted to get it right. And I actually felt quite alone. I was surrounded by all of these people on this monastic Buddhist path, and they were all really busy just accepting what is. And that included, oh yeah, you got AIDS. The difference today is that as I struggle with my partner's possible death, I see that where Buddhahood keeps showing up is when people keep reaching out to me and holding me and expressing love for me. And yet most of the networks that I belong to aren't designed for caregiving. They're designed for playfulness or socializing or worshiping. So then I tap into my fear.
Yeah.
I don't connect with my biological family, as many of us here probably don't. What's the new model for caregiving?
Well, you're bringing up a lot of really powerful issues. Thank you. And one response to the first part about how can you accept, or how can we accept that this death of loved ones is part of the same life that has things we do like to celebrate. And the Buddhist teaching of impermanence as one of the marks of our existence helps me, because I realize that it's all because of impermanence that these things happen, and impermanence is the cause of our suffering in the sense that things that we love die and they don't stay the same, but impermanence is also the cause of our joy. I mean, we're alive because we're impermanent, and just think, what if we were permanent? What if you were like a plastic flower in a vase just collecting dust and never wilting? That would not be very attractive. I mean, to be alive is to be impermanent, and so it just keeps, each thing just keeps changing, and death and illness is one aspect of it. But even in the midst of the dying, there's birthing that's happening, and sometimes it's harder to see it. And then you bring up the question of caregiving, and how can we find communities of caregiving, and that is frightening as we get older to worry about that. But also, I've been noticing how much kindness there is. I get afraid of being alone and old, and then if I stop and notice, I feel like there's so much kindness coming towards me, and if I can extend myself in kindness and compassion, there is some way that it it comes back, and I want to have more faith that it will come to me. Of course, you have to do things to plan it, and it's good to make plans, but you can have a lot of faith in the kindness and love of people when you approach other people with kindness. It does seem to get reflected back. Other comments? Yes.
Yeah, thank you so much for your observations, your wisdom, and especially your humor connection. I have two things. One, just a comment on something, and then a question for you. I just want to mention I have an old auntie that's in her late 90s, and she was a teacher, and she went by herself to India in the 50s and the 60s, traveled, and didn't have a practice, but exposed herself and did yoga in the 50s and 60s. And she's like, now can remember everything, her old languages and songs and things, but now she doesn't remember her loved ones. And she used to know very much, and now when I go see her, she doesn't know who I am, but she'll ask, and I say, oh, you know, I'm who, and I'm the son of your sister. She remembers the sister and the mother's and everything. And then she says, well, you know, I don't really remember you, but I know we had a wonderful time together, and I know I love you. And I just, she's so present, you know, that's all that's important to her. She's
That's a
not
fantastic
bitching,
story.
she's not upset that she doesn't remember me. She just says, I just know I love you, and she's just right there. So it's just such a joy to visit her. Even now.
Thank you. That's just a really great, inspiring story. Maybe I'll have that equanimity.
Yes, to be present.
Yeah.
And the second thing, when you talk about remembering things, forgetting things, luckily I think I'm still pretty sharp to remember things. But one thing I find that my nephew and younger people, they sometimes say, oh, don't you remember that? And since I've been doing more practice and I'm focusing on important things, and I'm on important people and important thoughts, so I'm not really, I don't want to remember all the chatter and the social, popular chatter or what Oprah said. I mean, I'm not interested in all this. And then they sometimes say, oh, you don't remember, you don't know. And I'm saying, well, I don't want to remember that stuff. I would just want to remember the important things. So how do you sort of mix and match with recognizing that you're not interested in that stuff, and it's okay to forget the chatter?
Well, it sounds like you don't have any trouble knowing that it is okay to forget the chatter. I mean, I think that is actually one of the advantages of aging is that you have an excuse to just stick to what's important with your time and how you spend your time, but also with your mind and what you put in your mind. You know that I too don't want to clutter up my mind with stuff that I'm trying to keep track of that just really is not meaningful to me. And but it's fine. I don't want to be judgmental about young people who have different minds and can hold all that other stuff about what Oprah said and not maybe push out everything else. I think I probably have a little bit less room in there. So, you know, I just think you're on the right track there. But how you speak to your nephew about it is, you know, a question you could consider, but just saying, you know, this isn't so important to me, but it's fine if it's important to you. But different people want to remember different things. Yes.
There seems to me to be intrinsic in the Zen practice, go beyond mind and memory and just focus on the breath and being present. And that's a timeless state. All of this, there is a place in my consciousness that wants to be in that unchanging state. And that a lot of what is going on in terms of the body seems to be coming from the outside in. For me to be an old man, or to be called Pop, or to be recognized as an old man doesn't really describe how I feel about myself and my life. All of the consequences of aging are there, but there is something that transcends the aging process and doesn't get old.
Yes, so true, really. I mean, there's kind of that realm of this absolute area where you're not old, you're not young, you're not gay or straight or male or female or whatever. You're just awake and aware in the present moment, and your Buddha nature, or whatever you want to call it, is flowing. And we do have access to that. We can find ways to be in that state. And we also have to not be in that state while we're negotiating our way through the day and making phone calls or whatever and going to work. And so I think we get lost in that relative mind where we are old and we do need to order new glasses or a new hearing aid or something, and can get discouraged there. But even in that discouragement, we can remember there's this other realm as well.
That's about all the time that we have.
Oh, okay.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Are there any announcements?
Let me just add, in case I guess I said, but I have some copies of my book outside for sale, which I'd be happy for you to get. And I don't have a lot, so they're available on the internet or at bookstores if we run out.
Well, I have an announcement. Next week we're having our All Sangha GBF. Let's get organized. Let's give thanks to the people who've been really supporting the Sangha and kind of keeping it on track, and also maybe select some new people to be part of that. So that's next week, and I hope you will all come. Tony, do you want to talk about hosts?
Yes, I'm the host today. So there are some goodies out there for you. There's a big bowl of apples that are fresh from the Bruce's not certified but organic orchard. We just gathered them yesterday, so please feel free to take as many as you want, and I can attest to the fact that they make an excellent apple crisp. If you have tea, please be sure you wash your cup in hot soapy water. There's some in the sink, and then rinse it and just put it in the drying rack. To the right, as you go out these doors, you'll see there's a piece of furniture, not sure what it is, but on top of that is the sign-up sheet. If you're new to the Sangha and you want to be on the mailing list, please sign up there. And if you're not new to the Sangha and you've changed your address, you could change there too. At around 12:30, some people will gather by the front entrance to go out to lunch together. So if you're interested in going to lunch with members, just hang out by the front door around 12:30. And last of all, I'll be walking around with the Dana bowl, and this is your opportunity to support the Sangha. The suggested donation is between $5 and $8, but whatever you can give is appreciated.
Any other announcements? Susan, would you like to lead us in a closing thought? Or I'm happy to do it.
Why don't you do it?
Okay.
I'd like to hear your closing thought.
By the power and truth of this practice, may all beings have happiness and the causes of happiness. May all be free from sorrow and the causes of sorrow. May all never be separated from the sacred happiness which is without sorrow. And may all live in equanimity, without too much attachment or too much aversion, and live believing in the equality of all that lives.
Thank you for listening to the Gay Buddhist Forum. If you would like to hear several new talks per month and be notified of upcoming speakers so you can participate live, please subscribe to this podcast, like us on Facebook, and join our mailing list by visiting gaybuddhist.org.